Um, I want everybody to take note that this is a sad occasion because Don Christian will be with us for the last time as the president of New Paltz and at least attending these council meetings. And I'd like to give him a heartfelt congratulations for the good service that he's done and for the way in which he has led this institution and been very successful and made us the institution that we are today. And I've threatened to come and blockade him in his house so that he can't leave. But I don't want Neil to have to send the police down to arrest me, so I'll refrain. Uh, but I just wanted everybody to know that this is Don's last meeting with us. So if anybody wants to say hello or wish any good wishes to him, please feel free. And if not, then I'll go on with the meeting.
Thanks, Ron.
You're welcome. You will be missed.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to say anything? Don't be shy now. Okay. All right, so we're going to skip the approval of the minutes. Don, we're going to ask you to give your final report.
Wow. Okay. So this is my final college council meeting out of, I think I counted 55 that I've been a part of as president. I want to say in turn that I'm grateful to all of you and to previous council members for your commitment, your support to the institution. Some of you have served for decades, others only in the twilight of my presidency, but I do want to share that your guidance helps us better serve our communities and our regions, and I hope that you'll have the same important role for my successor. I believe I've shared with you that we plan to remain in the Hudson Valley in retirement. I'm looking forward to growing the garden. I was just looking at deer-proof fencing here a few minutes ago, fishing more often. I have some hobbies that I want to pursue. I'm going to spoil my grandson and hope to live at a different pace than I have as his president. The final weeks of the semester have remained crazy busy, and I don't see much sign of that letting up until after commencement on May 20, 21, and 22. I do have a few updates about things going on at the campus that I want to share. One is that COVID-19 is still with us, and we've seen a small increase, we think, post-Easter travel. But not a surge by any means. COVID has remained mostly under control, and we're optimistic of getting through the semester intact and in person. I will share that I see lots of students still masking, and I'm not aware that we've had any controversies and conflicts around that matter like we hear about on airplanes and other public transportation. A faculty member who's immunocompromised shared with me that their request to students to put on masks in class was met with just easy and full respect and acceptance, and that's a mark of the goodwill of this community and our students. Reading about the challenges that presidential leadership leaders at other colleges and universities in other states really leaves me feeling blessed to have been president during these times here in New York and especially at SUNY New Paltz. A few other things to note. Vice President Halstead will later on share a budget report, mostly to share that we don't know much yet about details of the enacted New York State budget, except that most early assessments are that this is the most favorable state budget for SUNY in decades. We're tracking fall semester enrollments closely, and at least at the undergraduate level, we're doing fairly well, even if we didn't reach the very lofty goals for enrollment growth that we set for the campus. Like lots of other colleges and universities, we're seeing different decision-making behavior by prospective students and their parents, and that's making it really difficult to fully understand right now what fall enrollments may look like. We have a better chance perhaps after May 1 here in a week or so. The increased state support for SUNY that I just mentioned aligns with Governor Hochul's many priorities that she outlined in her, at least the written book for her State of the State address. visions for transforming the SUNY system and indeed higher education in New York. Her plans will help to build a more resilient middle class by fostering economic development and jobs and growing the educated population base in New York. So her aim, very lofty aim, is for SUNY to increase overall headcount enrollment from the current 370,000 to 500,000 or more by 2030. SUNY's working on developing a multi-year plan that will include in-migration from other states, reversing the out-migration in New York, and also reaching more post-traditional adult learners, international students through workforce training and more. SUNY's putting together working groups to begin this planning during the coming summer. We don't know much detail about what that will look like yet. The governor's vision includes a role for higher education and notably SUNY in modeling access and equity for our broader society. Some of you were present at the spectacular scholarship reception we held last week, which is the first in-person event like that we've had since 2019. We celebrated awarding more than $1 million in foundation-supported scholarships this year, same last year, and being on track to do so again next year. If we look at both the dollar amount of scholarships awarded and the number of students supported, those have increased nearly fourfold since 2013 and 14, and that's one of the most significant outcomes of our really successful multi-year Soaring Higher campaign. On the sustainability front, I'll mention that the State University Construction Fund is providing resources to help develop a clean energy master plan for New Paltz, subsidized in part by the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, NYSERDA, and based on a proposal that was developed and submitted by former Assistant Vice President for Facilities, John Shoup. So the overall purpose of that plan is to develop a plan to drive significant long-term, proven, cost-effective building upgrades, infrastructure changes that can help lead to carbon neutrality by 2050. 4 New Paltz students will receive Chancellor's Awards for Student Excellence at a ceremony in Saratoga Springs tomorrow. Those awards are based on really distinctive academic, athletic, leadership, service, and other achievements and contributions. We've always faced difficult decisions selecting only 4 or so recipients of the Chancellor's Award out of the many, many compelling candidates who are nominated for this recognition. So as a result, this spring, the college will present our first ever President's Awards for student excellence to 12 deserving students based on some of the same criteria as the Chancellor's Award for student excellence. So those are some updates of things going on at the campus. I'm happy to respond to any questions or comments that council members might have. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Don, thank you for your service, and you will be missed.
Thank you, Ron.
The next report is going to be on the search committee. As a lot of you probably know, 3 recommendations were made and sent up to SUNY Central, and SUNY Central had a series of interviews, and each one of the 3 candidates made presentations. And at the May 3rd meeting of SUNY, they will announce who the new president of New Paltz will be. Unfortunately, I don't know who that is. No announcement has been made, and until such time as May 3rd is when we all will learn. So I don't know anything else to say beyond that. And I guess anybody has any questions, I'll try to say I don't know, and I'll get back to you. So if you have questions, I'll listen. Yes.
Ron, do you know if it'll be announced to the campus at large first, or will it be announced to higher administration first, or how will that work?
The way as I understand it, go ahead, Shelley.
Yeah, I mean, the process that, they use for all campuses, it will be announced at the Board of Trustees meeting. And that's provided that, I think we have to be a little cautious here that we're, it's still a few days away. So, well, we can't, it's not a guarantee, but I think, it'll be issued, because it's a Board of Trustees decision, it'll come from the Board of Trustees. But the SUNY system administration works closely with the campus communications office so that we can roll it out. And another common thing that we can do is the board meetings are live streamed, so we can share a link and people can watch the board meeting live. And that's our intent as well, to
Right.
share a link.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions?
So when will the official first start date be for the new president, and how much overlap will there be?
That's not clear yet because I haven't, I don't think everything is completely wrapped. I think the goal is that there are going to be some announcements at the May 3rd meeting and then we'll know more then. So.
Don, did you want to say so? Did you want to add anything?
Well, only that I retire on June 30 as president, and not anticipating any overlap, but I will express to the next president, whoever that is, that I'm local and available and willing to give advice and insights, but I also want to stay out of that person's hair.
Any other questions? Okay, so I'm gonna move on to the next item. So once we know, we will make sure that there's at least a public announcement, and that the rest of the campus will know at the same time as we know. Okay? I'm gonna ask Stephanie, even though we probably won't be able to approve it, I think it would be best at least if we all understand what it is and can have some comments and input. So Stephanie, would you mind?
Ron,
Yes.
with Jeff joining the meeting now, I think you have a quorum, don't you?
We do, yes.
Okay, well, then we can vote.
We have
But-
5.
Right, before you give your report, Stephanie, let me go to the minutes of March 7th, last board meeting, and ask for the board to approve those minutes. Anybody want to? Jeff, are you raising your hand or are you just adjusting? Okay. Julie?
I'll move to accept the minutes.
Okay, do I have a second? Niels, seconds. Any questions or debate? Hearing none, I'm going to ask for the council to approve the minutes of March 7th, 2022. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, the minutes pass. Thank you all. Stephanie, would you mind now we'll go over the student handbook and hopefully we can approve that to your satisfaction or to our satisfaction.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
So we have a baker's dozen worth of pretty minor changes here to go over, and they were sent to you in advance. The green shaded portions are new language. So I'll just quickly go through these, yell if you have questions or concerns, and then I'll take a breath when we get to the end. The first section here is just defining who a student is. What prompted this is that we've had some misbehavior at orientation, for example, and we want students to understand that you're a student at that point. So this basically takes a pretty standardized version of who we mean the handbook is meant to cover. The second piece there are the next 2 items that start in green there. And it's really just to clarify that we are not going to be returning any confiscated items, including illegal weapons or narcotics. We don't have the means of storing those things, so that the truth is that those things are destroyed. But believe it or not, we have had students say, wait, you didn't tell me you weren't going to give me back my bong. So no, we're not going to give you back your bong. The third thing we wanted to clarify under fire equipment and alarms is that these are indeed arrestable offenses. So normally we have done just judicial proceedings if somebody tampered with a smoke alarm or other things, but we have had a few instances lately. Our UPD who respond to issues of health and safety have the discretion to have criminal charges in those cases. And there have been a few instances in which they have ended up being criminal charges for a variety of reasons. So we want to just be transparent with students that these are arrestable offenses. The fourth piece here is that if you have drug paraphernalia that has residue in it, it is going to be considered evidence of your possession. So we don't get into the discussion of, oh, I used that outside and then I came in to store it in my room because they can use cannabis off campus. If they're bringing it into their residence hall room and it has residue in it, that's possession of cannabis in the residence hall. Julie, did you have a question?
I think you're just missing the word be. It will be considered evidence of possession.
See, I was going so fast. I'm trying to catch up to myself. It yes, it will be considered evidence. You're right. It will be considered evidence. Okay. It's an easy one. Moving on to page 2 here. We are adding a clarification. This actually parallels what we do for alcohol. If you are significantly under the influence of cannabis to a degree that it interferes with your ability to function, that means somebody is going to have to come to your aid, and that is a handbook violation. And then you're going to see it in a few places where we have sanction ranges. It has been our practice in the handbook to give a student an idea of the kinds of sanctions that they could be facing, kinds of consequences they could be facing. We don't have to do this, and we always have the ability to do a range of consequences, but just for consistency and transparency's sake, we've gone through, and any place there wasn't that range of sanctions listed, we have gone ahead and added that. The next block is under that green 26, falsification. We are adding a new piece here that no person shall use, possess, manufacture, sell, forge, alter, or misuse a bunch of nouns. So what's a little bit confusing about how this is worded is you've got a bunch of verbs and a bunch of nouns, so you can play mix and match there as to which we're talking about. So for example, you can't sell a key. That's considered an official piece of our property, our record, our documents, and that would be a handbook violation. The reason that this kind of all came together is that we had some guidelines around our ID, what you can and can't do with our ID. But with the onset of COVID, we were seeing other official documents being forged. Thankfully, not very often, but we have had a couple of cases where, for example, a vaccination card was forged or test results were forged. And so those are both considered official documents. If you are falsifying those kinds of information, that's a handbook violation. The next section, we already have in the handbook that if you're under 21 it is a violation for you to be in the presence of students who are over 21 who are consuming alcohol. So we're just spreading the love here. Now we're making it a violation for those who are over 21 to be drinking in the presence of people under 21, unless it's their assigned roommate. So if they want to drink in their room and their roommate happens to be under 21, that's an exception there. The next one is driving on campus while intoxicated. We're adding or ability impaired. So this is basically the difference between a DWI and a DWAI, which covers marijuana and other substances. Next, under animals, we're simply clarifying here that if you have a care plan agreement because you have an emotional support animal, if you violate that care plan agreement, so for example, if you throw your guinea pig across the room, that indeed is a violation of the student handbook. We're going to hold you accountable for that. And sanctions include, you might forfeit the ability to have an animal in your room. Next is under that fire, health, and safety regulation, and going over to the next page, we're just adding items that might be a safety hazard must be properly stored. So we're not going to keep you from keeping a fishing pole in your room, but if we go in there to do our routine health and safety checks and there's a fishing lure dangling in your room at eye level, we're going to hold you accountable for that. You can't do that. All of these are true stories, by the way. Under possession of drug paraphernalia, again, it's evidence of possession, it won't be returned. So we've already talked about those things. The next one under official college communication, we're simply clarifying that faculty, staff, and administrators are only obligated to respond to an email that is the student's new Paltz email. If they write in from a Gmail account, it's the faculty member's prerogative if they would like to respond to that, but we do want to caution our faculty, staff, and administrators that you don't have any evidence that the person who is writing from that Gmail account is who they say they are. Whereas at least with the new Paltz email account, we have some reason to believe that they are who they say they are. Additionally, if a student uses an anonymous email, this can be an invented Gmail, or there's some email out there that specializes in being anonymous emails. If you violate the code of conduct and you've used that anonymous email, this is essentially just sort of a shot across the bow to let you know that anonymous doesn't necessarily mean anonymous. We can and will track you down if you're violating our handbook, trying to be sneaky. The last two are under the academic transcript and policy. Basically, this first section is that if you withdraw while you've got conduct pending, we're going to go ahead, and you don't show up for your hearing, we're going to go ahead and have that conduct process without you. And the reason that we do this is that we have had some cases where, okay, students left, we have an open file on them, they come back 6 years later, we've got this open case against them, but now all the people who were witnesses and all the evidence and nobody remembers what happened. So we're going to go ahead and just have that process without you conclude, and then whether or not you participate, it'll be a closed file on our end. Last but not least, this is if you are suspended, you are going to get incompletes, or you cannot complete a class if you're suspended halfway through. You can't leave and say, I'm going to have an incomplete and then finish up. That F asterisk, that's a direction from SUNY. It signifies that I failed my course, not because I didn't complete the academic work to a level quality. It's because I was suspended I was not able to complete the work, so it's an F asterisk. And those are our proposed changes.
Is there an exception if your guinea pig has bitten you?
Maybe. The guinea pig would have to be a witness.
Let me ask a question for clarification. If a student is caught with a illegal weapon, it's confiscated. Is that all that happens? They're not arrested or anything like that?
The answer is it depends. Normally, it's a violation of the handbook, but you could have bear spray, you could have a taser. It depends on what the illegal weapon is and whether or not there are criminal charges brought against you.
Okay, now the other question becomes, what happens if they have a license? Is that considered illegal
It is considered illegal. Well,
to be on
it
campus?
wouldn't be let's see. I think that's still a violation of the law. You can't. So there are a few little weird things here, but I think even if you had a license for your gun, you can't have a licensed gun in the residence hall, except if you're law enforcement, in which case we have a special exception to that.
Okay. And then again, still, so the only thing that happens is that we confiscate it. Now, under those circumstances, if it's legal, do we return it or we don't return it at all?
We're not going to return it. And that's really the change, is to be transparent that if we take it from you, we're not getting
Okay.
it back.
All right. And so, but they won't be arrested or anything like that.
So that's not really the change that's being proposed here. Really, what we're doing is we're saying we're not going to give this back.
Okay.
The question of whether or not it's arrestable offense depends. It depends on the circumstance. So the change here is really just to clarify, if we confiscate this illegal weapon, we're not giving it back to you.
Okay. Are there any other questions from any of the other councilman members? Okay, not hearing any questions. Can I have a motion to approve these changes to the handbook?
So moved.
All right. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Thank you. All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 All right. It passes. So we're moving along quite smoothly here. We've had the president's report. Let's see. Budget update.
You're muted, Michelle.
Yep. I'm going to attempt to unmute myself, and then I'm going to attempt to share my my screen. So here we go. Ugh. And I always hate this because it shows I have multiple screens. So are you seeing my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great. And I can only see a few of you because of the way I have this open. So if anybody has a question, just please feel free to speak right up and don't bother with the raising of the hand. All right, so first I'm just going to start, hopefully, if I can move my screen. All right. I'm going to, oops, there we go. All right, I'm going to start with just a quick refresher of where we began the year. Was we had anticipated revenues, which are made up by tuition and fees for fall and spring, and state state taxpayer support. Together, those two totaled about $63 million. And we had anticipated or estimated expenditures for the year that totaled $71.1 million. That gave us a projected deficit or a need to use our reserves at the end of the year of $8.1 million. At this point in the year, we have a good feel for where we may end up for the year. I think I previously announced that we were short of our actual tuition revenue target by about 1.7, almost $1.8 million this year. And that basically is because we did not meet our enrollment targets mostly pandemic driven enrollment decreases, but also a little bit of the mix of the students that we normally enjoy with fewer international students, fewer out-of-state students, and fewer graduate students who contribute a little bit more to our bottom line. They did not materialize this year. So our total tuition target was $47 million, but we only achieved 45.2. As for state support, that's looking good. While we've only received 6.3 million of dollars of state support so far, we have no reason to believe that we won't receive the additional 9.6 by the end of this fiscal year. So that leads us to achieving a total tuition and state support revenue of $61.2 million. Fast forward, now we're looking at the expenditure piece of the puzzle. We're a little bit more than 75% of the way through the year. So our personal service dollars, we're actually looking good. We are underspending our personal service dollars by $2.2 million. Temporary service, which is our adjunct instructors and a few other temps on campus, particularly administrative folks and some in grounds and facilities. Those dollars look like we are going to just underspend that line item by about $250,000, which is good. Utilities, this is where I put a little bit of a fudge factor in here. Is we've seen especially electricity dollars are spiking, and we all know what's happening at the gas pumps, which has a little bit of a correlation to what we're seeing in our heating fuel. So normally we underspend our utilities line item by a significant amount of money. This year, I'm anticipating still underspending, but by only about $300,000. And then supplies, travel, contracts, and equipment. We budgeted $4.1 million. We've spent 2.9 so far. What you see in the estimated expense remaining is a pretty wild guess. I looked back at the last few years to see how consistently we spent in the last quarter of the year, and it hasn't been consistent at all. Thank you, COVID. I just looked at an average for the last few years, knowing that we are trying to hold the line on all of our expenditures and doing a pretty good job. So I put a figure of $750,000 in there, which will still leave some money on the table there. Hopefully about $400,000. So when we compare our total revenues to our total anticipated expenditures at the end of the year, it looks like we have shaved off some of the need to use that reserve by about $1.5 million. So even though we didn't meet our revenue target, we're holding the line on those expenditures, which is great. And we're holding the line harder than we normally do. So we anticipate using about $6.7 million worth of reserve this year, which all in all is not bad, for a global pandemic. Before I move forward, any questions on the current year status of the budget? Okay.
Okay.
As President Christian said before, there's still a lot that's unknown about the current enacted budget for the state of New York, but I figured I'd give you a little bit of a primer on what we might anticipate seeing in a few of the categories that were mentioned in the budget. So I know I've previously spoken about this elusive TAP gap. For those of you who might be new to the council, the campus actually pays part of the tuition dollars that we receive from other students back in the form of a gap that is achieved because the largest estimated or the largest award for TAP is somewhere around $5,500. but our total tuition, the maximum tuition that an undergraduate resident student pays is $6,700. So the difference between those two, between the maximum TAP and the tuition rate, is borne by the campus in a reduction in our revenue, actually a discount in our revenue. What we've seen in the past couple of years, given our current enrollment, is somewhere between a $2 and $3 million discount that we've had to give back in the form of tuition dollars. So if that TAP gap is eliminated all in 22-23, that means an increase in our revenues given if enrollment stays flat. Another increase to our revenue is going to be seen in the reset of the Excelsior tuition rate. Very similar to the TAP gap, Excelsior was set at a rate, I believe the 2015-16 or 16-17 tuition rate. Excelsior tuition students only, the state only pays that rate from 5 years ago, but our tuition rate has increased since then. So the gap again is borne by the campus in the form of a reduction to our revenue. So this year, the governor's enacted budget says that they are going to reset the Excelsior tuition rate and keep it current every year when tuition does increase. So that to the campus is about $1 million value again at the current student financial profile and enrollment rates. Does someone have a question? I'm hearing a little bit of feedback. No? Okay. The other, you'll notice on the slide, all of the other tenets of the budget says that we don't yet know exactly what the impact will be for SUNY New Paltz. All that we know that we are hopeful that we will see some money coming in for these. There's a line item in the budget for $53 million for all of SUNY for new faculty lines. So we're interested to see what that, what the rules and regulations are surrounding that. There's a $60 million line item for non-recurring campuses sorry, I'm mumbling here. The $60 million non-recurring funding is for SUNY, CUNY, community colleges and statutory colleges. It is one-time funding. We don't yet exactly know how competitive it might be. And it's basically for process improvements and for marketing for the campuses. So we don't yet know what that might be for SUNY New Paltz. There are also great news for our students, increases to our EOP programs. As you probably know, New Paltz enjoys a very large comprehensive EOP program. And I believe the state, the enacted budget is $5.2 million. So we're hopeful that we'll see a decent amount for our students in the increased EOP funding. There are also increases in funding for the child care centers. About 6 or 7 years ago, the child care center funding that comes from the state was reduced. On our campus, it was about a $10,000 reduction per year. The state subsidy for the child care centers at that time was about $45,000. Now we're seeing about $35,000. An increase to those centers would be really welcomed by all of the campuses to help keep those centers open and serving our students and faculty and staff. And then the last item is actually a really, really good news for the campuses, and the capital funding for all campuses was increased to $1.2 million, or $2 billion, sorry, billion with a B. Whereas last year it was $550 million plus a lump sum. Part of the $1.2 billion is sort of they call it the big lump, but it is flexible funding, which we haven't seen in a few years, which means we are eligible to probably compete for some dollars to see some increases to square footage on the campus, whereas we haven't been for the past several years, able to do anything but create new spaces by renovating currently existing buildings. So this is really exciting for us to see what will be coming down the pike. So it was 550 million plus 400, I believe, and 25 million added to that, and some lump funding in the neighborhood of 200 and I think $25 million. I have a meeting this week on Wednesday and Thursday with my colleagues in at all of the other comprehensive and university centers. We'll be meeting with the Vice Chancellor for State University Construction Fund and the Associate Vice Chancellor for Budget. So we're very interested to see how all these funding sources are going to play out for the individual campuses. But right now I can't give you any concrete dollars until we know a little bit more. Any questions? I'm gonna stop sharing so I can see your faces.
Ron, I think you're speaking but muted.
There we go.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Thank you for your report, Michelle. My question to you is the possible $4 million increase that you identified. Does that have any impact on the prior page in terms of numbers?
No, so those will be for 22, 23.
Mhm.
So the reduction or the elimination of the tap gap and the reset of the Excelsior are all for fiscal year 22, 23. So moving forward.
Okay, so will that allow us to in some ways recoup some of our reserve?
Only to the extent that we don't spend it. So as you saw on the current year page, we had in the beginning of the year a $71 million expenditure need.
Mhm.
All of the divisions right now have committed to a 5% reduction in our expenditures going forward, which will help narrow the gap along with the tap gap elimination and the Excelsior reset. So we're squishing an $8 million challenge down to hopefully somewhere in the $4 or $5 million range. But that is all, since we are so enrollment dependent, since 77% of that particular budget comes from enrollment, we really need to see how many students we can get in these doors in the fall and what their profile looks like. Are they graduates, undergraduates, international, and full and part-time? So to the extent that we can squeeze those expenditures and raise the enrollment, we will lessen the need to use the reserve in the future, but we are not going to eliminate our gap completely.
Okay.
Another thing that I keep telling folks that we have to be mindful of is that we have centrally negotiated collective bargaining from the state. So the state negotiates all of the unions on campus, their collective bargaining agreements. And since those, most of them are either out of contract or about to be out of contract, we foresee and hope that our faculty and staff see some increases in their salaries. With an increase in salary that is not backed by either an increase in tuition rate or an increase to the state taxpayer support levels, that will be another expansion of that deficit. So we're looking very closely at how those contracts are settled and what those impacts might be for the campus. Because one thing that was missing in the enacted budget was the thought that SUNY's been trying to negotiate a real maintenance of effort for the last few years. If you're going to increase our expenditures without us being able to control it, the state needs to back that increase in expenditures with an increase in support. And that would be a true maintenance of effort, but we have not had that for 6 or 7 years in the budget. So like I said, we're looking forward to finding out exactly how those things play out.
So, Jeff,
I'm just curious, how much money is in the reserves?
About $18 million. And I say about because it depends on where we end it this year, and it's all about the timing. So if we are going to use $6 to $7 million this year, that gives us 11 left. So we have a couple more years if we do nothing, which we never do nothing on this campus. We're always doing something. You know, we'll have a couple more years to figure this out. And we've got some really aggressive enrollment strategies that we are employing right now to get more students back in the door. And just like I said, every division on campus has committed to a 5% reduction in expenditures. Most of us need to achieve that by July 1st of this year, with academic affairs having a little bit longer of a runway because it's so complex to be able to deliver instruction without having people. So we've got to make sure that we're doing that in a thoughtful manner, and that we have the instructors where we need them.
okay. Julie?
A question about the lines that are competitive in the past. Has New Paltz been pretty aggressive in seeking that competitive funding, and beyond seeking it, have we been successful?
Yes, we usually put our best foot forward. Recent successes I can tout are the Prodigy funding that Tahina is very well involved in, that she manages. So we cast the net for those funds, and they came back in droves. Yes, we always have our competitive guild on and are ready to go after and tackle some funding opportunities.
One of the uncertainties along that line, Julie, and others, is that the governor's State of the State address talked about a vision of having Stony Brook University and University of Buffalo become international level research institutions. And one of the pieces that isn't clear yet is how those new faculty positions will be distributed across campuses within the SUNY system. I've been heartened so far that the signals all seem to be some growth across the entire system, all sectors, but again, not clear what that will be.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions? All right, so Michelle, you're counting on Jeff to have a very robust September, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And for me to have a robust September, because I'm the international admissions person, I'm trying so hard to get those 8490 tuition students in here.
I'm sure you will be successful, particularly if COVID is over. I'm sure you'll be able to attract a lot of international students back to the campus. Any other questions? Neil, was your hand up? Okay. Seeing that we're at the end of our agenda, Lisa will be getting in contact with us regarding the calendars for the fall. And hopefully I'll see a lot of you at graduation ceremony. And again, Don, farewell, do well, and our blessings go with you.
Thank you, Ron. Thanks, everyone.
Would someone like to introduce a motion to adjourn? You don't want to adjourn? Okay.
No one wants to go.
Julie called for it and Neil seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. We are adjourned, and thank you all.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.